Okay, let me just kind of go through the quality assurance rubric. This changed about 3 years ago, and now it's old. That the fact that it changed 3 years ago is old history. We're starting to get used to this process, so hopefully it will be something that especially the team leaders, the experienced people, will have gone through before. And once again, it's not for every program. So those programs, like I used the example of the Chattanooga State English program, they're not going to be expected, and you will not be asked to fill out a rubric on them. But there are about 22 criteria on the rubric, and there are, I just wanted to go through just to introduce this, and this is something that you can review, you can read about, you can contact me about for further explanation, and that's why I think it's going to be very healthy to have this extra time to complete this rubric, because if you're really saying, well, how do I distinguish between an established program and a highly developed program, we can kind of have a conversation about that. But first of all, it may be that one of the criteria is simply not evident. And it has to be not evident in two places. So we'll go back to our tried and true example of a program that collects results of its assessments, but there's nothing in the self-study that says that they do anything with those results. Okay? And one of the criteria says something about uses the results of the assessments. So in that case, you would say, all right, that is a not evident. But when you get to the site visit and you ask questions about that, then you find out that there are quite a few responses. They may not be sophisticated, they may not be fully mature, but they're doing something. If they're saying, if you ask the question, how do you use the results of your assessments for improvement, and you just get a blank screen, no response. Finally someone says, I don't think we do anything with them. We just collect them, we have them in a database. Then that would be an example of not evident. More than likely. I mean, remember that this rubric is not something that we manufacture the day before the site visit. It's something that's been out there for 4 years. It's something that's in the training materials for the programs. It's like, have you had this experience? You give out your students a list of the questions that will be asked on the assessment, and they still get some wrong? Right? How is that possible? Okay? But this is the case that could be that they just simply have ignored it, and it's just not there. But again, more than likely, the criteria for a program that has said very little about how it uses assessment will be at an emerging level. So they may have just begun to address it, or one of their initiatives for improvement is to address this. So they have a planning process in place. So it's not matured, it's not in place, it's not sophisticated, but it's beginning. So that would be an emerging metric that you would use. You would label that as emerging. Okay? Then established means that it's been in place, it's being used, and particularly that the program faculty are aware of it and participate in these processes. So this is a pretty well established, that's why it's called established, part of the program. So they have metrics in place for students who do not, for student assessments, and they use the results, and there are 1 or 2 or maybe even 3 instances of how they've used that for improvement over a period of time, a couple, 3 years at least. All right? And then the final criteria is highly developed. I would say that this is where the most equivocation takes place. The distinction between established and highly developed, right? And I think that a couple of the distinguishing factors are scope-oriented. Who's involved in this process? So if you look back on that question I posed to you early on about what would you do if you found that there were 25% of your students who were not progressing on an assessment, who were getting D's or F's or abandoning them in the middle of the assessment, or just not doing them at all. And you came up with a number of answers, if you think about it. A highly developed program, a highly developed response would be given to a program that is bringing all of these stakeholders into the mix. They're not just working with their faculty, in other words. Okay, faculty, we got 25%, how do we solve the problem? And they brainstorm and they come up with some answers. But rather that this now has a process where they contact their students, they contact their adjunct faculty, they contact their advisory committee. They go outside of their own discipline and see what's going on in other programs. Okay, how are other programs using this? All right. So when we first started this program at Chattanooga State, I was chair of the humanities department, and we were looking at ways of improving the program. And one of our faculty members said, "We ought to do what math does." And I was like, And I said, "No, share with me." She said, "Oh, I have a good friend who's in the math department. We were talking about this the other day." And she said, well, she had to leave the lunch rather early because she was meeting with her peer adjunct. And I said, "What is a peer adjunct?" She said, "Oh, all of us in the program are assigned an adjunct professor, and we kind of are their mentors, and we just work together as a team." And I said, "All of you?" She said, "Yeah. I mean, how long have you been doing this?" "Oh, I don't know, 7, 8 years, 10 years. She couldn't even remember how long it had been going on. I mean, these people were in the next building over. I had already been at Chattanooga State 7 years. I'd never even heard about it. And there wasn't anything close to that in the humanities programs. We had, I mean, English alone, we had 25 full-time faculty, and in the fall term we had 50 part-time faculty teaching for us, okay? And the only contact that each one of those 50 people had in the program was me. 50-to-1 ratio. I was so happy, okay? And so I actually, in my time there, introduced this idea, and I wasn't there long enough to see it to fruition, but I was there long enough to institute a pilot. We got faculty volunteers, and we had about 8 or 10 of our faculty who said, "I'd be happy to work with it," and they started this program. But we went outside of our own department, not outside of our campus. We just went to the next building over. And so that, to me, would be kind of a highly developed process, is that they're engaging stakeholders. And then this other part is that they're not only collecting the results, but they've been at it long enough to say that they've used the results. And what happens in this cyclical wheel-like process of institutional effectiveness is that results beget initiatives, beget results, beget, and sometimes you get a flat tire, so then you just change the tires and then you start again. So in other words, sometimes the results will say, "Let's do this," and it flops. It doesn't work, okay? You say, "We're having a lot of problem in our English program with students using proper documentation for MLA, so we'll develop an MLA tutorial online." So, wow, that sounds great. So you develop it, you put it out there, you find out at the end of the first semester that 3 of your 300 students have booted up that tutorial. And you're like, okay, so we got a flat tire here. What are we going to do? But a highly developed program wouldn't just simply say, well, the heck with that. They would think about, well, there's the results that we have right now. How can we improve upon those results? And sometimes they would say, just change the tire. Let's just throw that one out. And we did so much work on that. Yeah, it didn't work. Get out of here. Fail early and move on. Okay? So there's that dynamic, but it really comes down to a highly developed program in my mind. There is a culture of continuous improvement. And that means there's a culture of continuous failure, but it's non-threatening failure. It's just what happens. Okay? It's inevitable that as you instigate change, that some of that change will not be productive change. You'll hit walls. It will just not work. The peer adjunct thing might work great for the math people. Okay? You try to do that with artists and musicians and stuff, and it just doesn't come off. They're just going to do their own thing, and they don't want their style cramped. And you just have to come up with a different means of doing that rather than bonding them with one person. So that might be the case. If that's the case, then a highly developed program is going to respond to that and not just force feed it because it sounded like a good idea and it works for the math people. So yeah.
I had a question about adjunct faculty. So a lot of times I think schools are going to be, programs are going to be hamstrung through no fault of their own about the involvement of adjunct faculty because they cannot provide an economic incentive for adjunct faculty to be involved. How do you don't want to dock a program because of that. How do you handle that?
Well, in Massey's original description of the academic program, and occasionally you'll see it like right here. You see how I've capitalized faculty? Okay, that I stole from a book called Seven Arrows by Jaime Storm, which is an account of Cheyenne Native American philosophy. And in that book, when a word comes up that means many things at many levels, he uses all caps. So like coyote means an animal, but it has layers of meaning in the mythology and the philosophy of the Cheyenne Indian. So I've used it here in a similar way that faculty, when we think of faculty, we think of whom?
Full-time.
Full-time, tenure track, have an office, come to faculty meetings. I mean, think about who those are. And so often that's the only group that gets involved in these kinds of processes. So what Massey would say faculty includes are all people who are engaged in the teaching and learning process. So that means adjunct faculty at universities, that means graduate assistants, that means part-time faculty, that means online faculty, okay?
I think we understand that. I think my question is, what if through the development of the self-study, that individual program was not able to engage the entire gamut of their faculty because in order to require that engagement, they would have provided economic incentive to do so because of the limited amount of time that adjunct faculty can be expected to contribute to a program. So they were not able to
I gotcha. Gotcha.
That's my question.
If that were the case and it was documented,
Okay.
then I would say, okay, they get a pass on that.
Okay.
But if they said, but if there was no evidence that if they had made that presumption without making the attempt to engage them, then that's a different thing. Because the level of engagement nowadays, especially through electronic media, that you can have with these ancillary faculty groups, if you will, not to demean them, but just because they're outside of the core faculty, pretty much most of your core faculty you can get to a meeting at 2 o'clock on Wednesday afternoon. You can't do that with your adjuncts, your grad assistants, whomever else. They've got other fish to fry, they're working, they're in classes of their own. They're not nearly as immediately available. So if you could reach them through asynchronous electronic means, if you can hold a special session just for them at 5 o'clock in the evening before classes begin.
Provide dinner.
And provide dinner. No,
right?
that's true. That's true. I mean, a pizza party is a cheap way of getting people together.
Yeah.
But I think nowadays more frequently the tool is used is by sending out a Google Doc, sending out a Survey Monkey, sending out an email questionnaire, an opportunity to respond, a conference call, a one-on-one call, I mean, some of our programs only have 1 or 2 full-time faculty, and they are really relying upon those, those paramedics that come in and teach this one class, right? Well, because they're not a full-time person, do you not want their input on what's working in the classroom, what's not working in the classroom? What tools they need to improve their instruction?
I'm just saying, unless being part of the self-study is part of the adjunct's job description, I think it's unreasonable to ask them to participate in that without some economic compensation.
I don't know if it's unreasonable, and I think that if it's explained that participation in quality improvement processes is part of the job description, I think that might be something that we could. I hadn't thought of it before, but maybe it's something that really needs to be thought about as we bring faculty in, adjunct faculty in. I agree with you. If you say, well, we need you to come in Tuesday from 2 o'clock to 5 o'clock, okay, well, it means I got to give up time at work, and you're only paying me what you're paying me, which isn't much. That would be perhaps an undue expectation, unless you are going to remunerate them. But I think you bring up a good point. It might be something we need to consider at the system level. And by the way, a little side note here is that the TBR is in fact going through the process of revisiting every policy that we have. Okay? In academic affairs alone, that's about 54 policies and guidelines. That's a great suggestion, that we actually build that into the language of these policies. And one of the policies is now a guideline, which is compensation of part-time faculty. And I think that if we elevate and aggrandize the role of the adjunct faculty as being more than just showing up at that outlying site at 5:30 when you feel like it, no. But showing up, teaching your class, grading your papers, and handing in your grades at the end of the semester, but really make them linked to the entire faculty and teaching and pedagogical process, then we'll have gained as institutions and as systems, and our students will gain. I've never had a student tell me that when they go into class the first time, that they ask whether the professor is full-time or part-time. They're the professor. They're the teacher. Okay? So they have the same authority, the same responsibility, the same aura, the same expectations and the same opportunities as somebody who has been there 27 years and is a full professor emeritus.
I just want to jump in there and absolutely affirm what you say, because I think a lot of us at the college level are well aware of this. All of our adjuncts are invited to our department meetings, invited to our retreats. We don't see them any differently. We don't treat them any differently, but we also recognize that they get paid very little.
Yep.
And asking them to do anything extra is really almost offensive. So I want to affirm that along with you, that maybe there will be a shift to that. Maybe at the system level, we can pay them for some time on the academic audit would be great.
I think it's a great idea. I really do.
The
Flora?
compensation guideline that you have.
Yeah.
I was actually reviewing it a week or 2 weeks ago. If you pay attention to the last time that compensation plan was reviewed, I believe it's 1998.
Well, actually, it was changed a little bit in 2005, and we went through a whole system process that I led in 2011, 2012, and changes to that.
Task force, if you
Remember that?
I was on
Okay,
that
you were
task
there.
force, and nothing was done.
Nothing was done. It was tabled because of the economic impact of the changes that we had.
Right.
But once again, we're,
But you're
you know,
repeating it, and the reason I say that is because we've given adjuncts raises the past 4 years, every year. And we've hit the ceiling now at 2 levels. Unless you change your policy because you're setting the maximum, we can't give them more
Right.
raises.
well, it's one of the policies that's first on the hit list, so you'll be hearing more about it between now and June.
I put it on the
But-
president's agenda last semester.
Yeah, well, we're going to be doing it at a system level. And this is a great way to bring into the policy a concise but perhaps far richer description of what we mean by an adjunct faculty. And it's timely. And it also will provide rationale for why do we need to pay them more. We've been able to get them. We keep paying them every year less and less because of inflation and the cost of living and everything else. We still seem to manage to get them there. okay? That's just a poor economic model, is that we can muddle along at the same cost because basically all we can ask them to do is the bare minimum. If we say that we want them involved in quality, we understand it in some programs, like I was mentioning with our Composition 1 program, more than 10 years ago at Chattanooga State, 2 out of every 3 classes, well, not quite that many, but about 50% of our classes, when I think about most full-time people were teaching 5, most adjuncts were teaching about 2 sections, maybe a little more, an average of 2.5.
We have 100 adjuncts at Pellissippi every fall.
There you go. And so look at the impact on student success and student learning that our adjunct faculty is playing. And in many of our universities, when you look at the number of sections that are being taught by graduate assistants and that type of thing, we all went through that process more than likely if we went to a university. And so it's really timely. The universities will have to do what they're going to do, but we can affect policy for our community colleges in this coming year.
You had a question?
Yeah,
Sam?
I would say that many of the, not all of them, but many of the adjunct faculties, especially teaching online, they already have a full-time job. And therefore, it's very difficult to get them involved in, okay,
Yep,
all the activities or whatever stuff.
sure. At the same time, and true story, I can remember one time we were doing the archetypical textbook review process when I was at Chattanooga State. And we were talking about, we actually applied the academic audit process to the selection of the textbook. And so I said, you know, in the spirit of Bill Massey, when these capitalized faculty letters, we should invite an adjunct faculty member who teaches, this was for Composition 1, who teaches Composition 1 to be on the book review committee. I got the same response. Oh, they won't do it. We don't pay them enough. We'll have to pay them extra. And I said, maybe. I said, give me the names of a couple of people that might be good. And they gave me the name of this young woman who had just finished her master's degree and had gone from teaching. At that time, we bifurcated remedial education, and it was pre-co-requisite remediation. So she had been teaching developmental writing, and now she had her master's, so she was eligible to teach Comp 1. And she had done so in the fall. And I went up to her and I said, this is what we're doing, this is what it would take. Would you like to be on the committee? She was thrilled. She was thrilled because she wanted to be a full-time English teacher. And she knew that participating in this type of activity would bolster her resume. Now granted, somebody who is teaching accounting and is a CPA and has 74 clients during tax season, probably not going to be able to give you a lot of time to review a textbook or to help with the academic audit. So you might have to be selective in who you engage in this process. But we've come out of this with, to me, an opportunity for improvement. And that is to actually build into policy the parameters to help us better engage our part-time faculty and our adjunct faculty in quality improvement. Thank you. I always like more homework assignments.
Yeah, quick observation. Most of the 1980s, I ran a Rhone State associate's degree program with anywhere from 3 to 6 or 7 adjunct faculty. And so I can see those same challenges haven't changed since 1980 through 88 for me. I can see those same challenges exist. However, as you point out, Randy, our ability to communicate remotely has blown through the roof.
Right.
And we're able to use those kinds of times and opportunities in different ways.
Right.
today.
So we haven't resolved that problem, but we've got resources and we have the commitment to improve them. So let me just go through the rubric a little bit more. The rubric criteria pretty much follow the structure of the self-study report. So it's not like a whole different set of questions. And again, the rubric is in the guidebook. All right, so you can look at it. through the PDF that I've sent you. Most of you will have the undergraduate rubric that in addition to these, this is common to graduate and undergraduate. The rubric for the undergraduate talks about support, the academic audit process, and then the follow-up. The only real difference is that in the graduates audit, they insert a research environment section. So now the last part of your process and the last thing keeping you from easing on down the highway is just a quick review of the written report. Once again, we mentioned that kind of should have a timetable before you leave the site visit of who's doing what, confirm that, when you're going to turn in your contributions. If you make a recommendation, explain the recommendation. If you have a suggestion, gently suggest it. Don't say, if I were you, I'd do what we did. Because you want the program to take ownership. You don't want them to just do what they're told to do. You want them to say, okay, how are we going to make this our own? Again, a very good point made earlier. If you really don't, you see the omission or the opportunity, but you don't really have a solution, that's okay too. So let them know that that's a concern, and that you would suggest that they explore solutions with similar programs at other institutions, through state or national organizations for their discipline, through colleagues in other places and other times. So a lot of resources out there for them. If you do the quality assurance funding rubric and have, especially if you've identified a not evident or an emerging, those are good areas that you might want to comment on in your report to give them, again, some guidance on how to further develop those areas. I always ask my team members to proofread the final report before it gets turned into me. But I always give them about 72 hours to do so because you don't want it just hanging out there in somebody's inbox when they're in Ireland. They're not going to respond. And then there's the due date. It is Friday, May 11th, Sam. So that one slide is off by a day. So at any point in time, feel welcome to contact me. We have information on the website. We're updating it with some of this year's. I've sent you the slides from today already. You have the guidebook. If you want the academic audit handbook, that's on that website. Your team leader is going to be a great resource.
When did you send those? I don't think I have that.
Just
Maybe I'm
about 12:30 or so.
Just before the meeting.
Just before the meeting. Okay. I'll make sure that I send it specifically to you. Sometimes my list just doesn't work for everybody, and I might even have a message that returned or something like that. So I'll resend it. Sorry about that. But please be welcome. Send me an email, or if you'd like to talk about something, it's always better just to send me an email because my time is not my own. But I'd like to make some of my time your time to help you if I can in any way. So just be a little patient with me, but I'll get back to you. And if we need to talk something through at any point in time, I'm happy to do it. I look forward to it. If you have an idea on how we can improve this process, we've come up with some really good ideas today, then especially in those cases, let me know and I'll try to bring them into the system. Any other questions or comments?
Randy?
Yeah.
I noticed
that when you sent us the guide, the rubric forms were accurate? Do you still have the form fields that I gave you?
Yes. Oh, that's a great idea. Yeah.
Because I can send them again.
You might want to just send them again so that, and I'll just forward them to everybody.
It's just so much easier
Yeah.
to do the form field and print them out and mark them up and scan them in and put them back.
Right, right, good point, good point. So, yeah, Patsy last year took those rubrics and made them forms that you can fill out online. And so we'll make those available to you and particularly to the team leaders. And also, though, I also have them as like Word documents. If you're the type that like me, that sometimes it's nice to have something to scribble on, with who remembers what a pencil is, then I'll make those available to you as well. Yeah.
I didn't get the 12:30 email either, so just send it to me as well.
Okay. All right. Well, no, I'll just resend it. If you get it twice, then you can just delete it. But I'll try again. Okay. Sorry about that. All right. Well, thank you all very much. Thank you, all of you who are online, for participating, and safe travels home.